Hey, everybody, and welcome back to LFR, the casual podcast for casual players of World of Warcraft, where we usually make the lore of Warcraft more accessible. Today is going to be a little bit different, though. We're your hosts, Sarith
and Dracoris. LFR usually stands for looking for raid, but today I don't really have an LFR gag I want to use. Today we're going to be having a discussion around the Blizzard lawsuit situation, and honestly, everything surrounding that. Last month, after a 2-year investigation, the state of California, more accurately the DFEH, which is the Department for Fair Employment and Housing, brought a lawsuit against Activision Blizzard King, the parent company of Blizzard Entertainment, who, of course, make the game World of Warcraft. The basis of that suit involved discrimination against women and other minorities. It involved pay discrimination, constructive dismissal, discrimination in terms of promotion opportunities, and it included sexual assault. This is your trigger warning. We are going to have to discuss those things on this show. Now, here's the good news. Sarith and I don't intend to sit here and prattle amongst ourselves. 2 cishet white dudes are not who you need to hear from in all of this. Certainly not primarily or exclusively anyway. So today we are joined by not 1 but 2 wonderful guests. We have Discordian Kitty, aka Laura, a games journalist and writer for Wowhead. And we have Lex, a content creator on Twitch and TikTok. Do you guys want to go ahead and introduce yourselves to the listeners?
Hi, everyone. As you said, I'm a writer for Wowhead. My main focus is the lore. I've been playing the game since Burning Crusade. And that's about it.
Hi, I am Lex. I have been playing World of Warcraft since about Legion. My 2 true loves are World of Warcraft and social justice, so this is not the intersection that I want it to be, but an interesting intersection nonetheless. And thank you all so much for having me here.
Thank you guys for being here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
So, we've discussed our history with Blizzard games pretty in-depth here, and Laura, you said you've been playing since Burning Crusade. Lex has been playing since Legion, which I think gives us a pretty fun, I don't want to say the word fun on this episode, but a pretty interesting avenue here because it's 2 people who have been in the game for over a decade and 2 people who have been in the game for a few years. So it might kind of shade how we're looking at this and, our familiarity with any of these names, which I say that, and then I'll also say that I'm not familiar with any of these names outside of, Chris Metzen, Afraziabi, and that's about it. Obviously, Christy Golden, but when I think Christy Golden, I don't think Warcraft. I think Star Wars, because the first time I read one of her novels was a Star Wars novel.
Oh, fascinating.
I mean, for me, actually, I think the first one of hers I read was a Star Trek novel, so...
Boo!
Yeah, it is interesting to me that most of the names that I know now in the modern and old guard Blizzard world and World of Warcraft world are now people that I hate. That is, I learned about them through Twitter being assholes, so...
Hey, alleged assholes.
I'm so sorry. Yes, you're right.
We've got to be legally clear for the purposes of the podcast and the fact that we don't want to be slandering anybody.
Take it easy, Fran Townsend.
Fran Townsend would block you on Twitter for that. I'm just going to tell you to suck it.
Wait, so...
I would consider it a badge of honor for Fran Townsend to block me on Twitter.
Yeah, I'm kind of annoyed she didn't get around to it, to be honest. But yeah, so people without any context are going to have no idea what we're talking about there, are they? But basically, when this lawsuit came out, the first thing that happened was that Activision Blizzard put out an absolutely terrible tone-deaf response. Absolutely just horrendous. They said that it was, unaccountable bureaucrats was one of the phrases they used. They said that lawsuits like this were part of the reason that good businesses were leaving California.
Which, that one fucking pissed me off. Like, good businesses are leaving California because they have the audacity to take care of the people who work in California. Are you fucking kidding me?
Such bullshit. So that was that. And then a little bit after that, we had an email that was circulated internally at Blizzard that obviously found its way onto Twitter because that's what happens. And it was an email from somebody called Fran Townsend, who I think it's fair to say most of us had never heard of until this happened.
Well,
That's accurate.
Oh, yeah.
I had heard of her in a different context, which would be the torture apologist for George Bush.
Oh, yeah.
So I still am confused why Activision Blizzard thought that what they needed was a Republican torture apologist for their company. And like she's still there. They still seem to think that she's, a worthwhile employee. I'm not entirely sure what she's supposed to do, other than maybe be a moustache twirling, obvious evil bad guy that you can just sort of send a sort of bad feeling after.
Well, Blizzard was kind of packing its ranks to some degree with people coming off of conservative political movements. And when we called that out, we were all told that we were crazy and that it's not fair and that we were being, discriminating against the Republicans. And look what we saw. It's like we were saying.
I mean, this Fran Townsend, Laura, you probably could have seen this coming then, knowing what she was like. But I think for the rest of us, we didn't really expect somebody who was on what's her title? Her title was the executive sponsor of the ABK Employee Women's Network. So she was the head of the Women's Network, and her response to this lawsuit was to say that it presented a distorted and untrue picture of our company, including factually incorrect, old and out of context stories, some from more than a decade ago. So if it happened more than a decade ago, it didn't happen, or
yes, and what context is harassment okay in? What's the context that?
And also, some of the specific context that is in the lawsuit as well, and the fact that what essentially happened here, my understanding, and I have actually read the vast majority of the lawsuit, and there is a female individual who worked for Blizzard, Activision Blizzard anyway, who sadly took her own life as a result of co-workers and I believe a supervisor passing around pictures of her genitalia.
Mm-hmm. At a company party, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. What kind of fucking context could there possibly be to excuse something like that? Ever. In any way, shape or form. How does the email not start immediately with an apology? The easiest fucking thing in the world. I mean, obviously you then need to follow up and do something. But, the fact that it doesn't even start with an actual apology. It started with, I want to reach out to you, and then, this lawsuit's bullshit, rah, rah, rah. I can't wrap my fucking head around it.
Well, this might be, I don't know, a little uncharitable, but one thing that struck me with the early Blizzard response, both from Fran and just the general response, is that it felt a lot like the response that an HR person would write if they have decided that they're going to lose the women and more liberal side of their company. And so they might as well just appeal to the pros, right? You might as well give them something that they can latch onto and they can be like, well, they said it was old. They said it didn't matter. I don't know. The emails felt a lot like she's just a lying bitch, right? And that, who's gonna be sympathetic to that, right? It's not the women. They weren't really concerned about whether or not we were gonna stay around, right? But the people who are gonna be sympathetic to that are the people who are more on your the more conservative Call of Duty. And I mean, also not to act like World of Warcraft does not have a very strong bro-y side, but that was the vibe I got, is that's who they wanted to appeal to, and so they just allowed the rest of us to be angry.
Yeah, I think the timing was interesting because I saw a lot of that kind of behavior because it came out right after the Race to World First. And I'm always enthralled by the Race to World First and watch it all the time. So I'm usually watching Limit Stream, usually Max's stream because it's, at a logical time of day for me. And I have to turn chat off because it is just so heinously toxic. It's not as quite as bad as the A guy, but it's pretty bad.
Yeah. And so, yeah, you're not wrong. And I think the one thing I'll say to that is there's the thing about like appealing to the kind of bro mentality. There's also the thing about appealing to her bosses, which is probably the only thing that Fran Townsend gives a shit about, if we're honest. And her bosses are, whether they're part of that bro fraternity mentality or not, because actually, to be completely fair, they might not be. Someone like Bobby Kotick doesn't really strike me as someone who would be getting involved with the fraternity culture. I think he's probably too rich for that, to be honest. So I kind of feel like if she's appealing to that demographic, it probably wasn't a conscious thing. I think you might absolutely be right that that's what's going on. I also think that she's just kind of a scumbag person who's learnt scumbag things. And I mean, if you worked for she worked for the Bush administration, that's not far removed from the Trump administration. Let's be really honest about it. And the responses from Blizzard as a whole and then from her were both just, I mean, I saw someone call it Trumpian on Twitter, and I think that was absolutely accurate. Filled with ad hominems and invective that were completely unnecessary and didn't address the points. And that's Trump to a T. And I think that's the conservative side of things over where you guys live, unfortunately, at the moment. And I think that's probably what it reflects more than like an appeal to the frat culture that might still exist within Activision Blizzard. I think it's more just an appeal to kind of right. And I say this is in right of the political, not right as in just, right-sided mentality people,
Yeah, and I don't think it was really to appeal to the frat culture at Blizzard per se, but in the player base.
Right. See, I don't think they give a flying fuck about the player base.
See, I disagree, because without the player base, they have no money.
There's been some stuff recently about that. Blizzard employees talking about how things seem to be viewed internally, and one of the things I saw was that essentially there's a disconnect between how the executives see things and how the people working on the games see things. The people working on the games absolutely care about the player base. The executives care about the shareholders. Now, there is another level to that where obviously the shareholders should care about the level of players and stuff like that, but I think they care about it more as a number, as opposed to actually thinking about what the players like or don't like or give a shit about or don't give a shit about. So, I mean, to me, I've said this on Twitter yesterday, I think, but, I've seen people saying that the new customization options that are coming out in WoW are somehow a response to the lawsuit. And it's just bullshit. There is no way in hell that anybody at an executive level in Activision Blizzard King gives a flying fuck about Void Altheas. They just don't. And I think that kind of goes to the same thing about, do you try and appeal to the player base with a statement about a lawsuit? No, you don't. You try to appeal to the shareholders.
There's something that I saw that was an article about what the shareholders are upset about. And like one of the things was World of Warcraft does not make the sort of money off microtransactions that other MMOs make. It's like they're actively upset about this. That's like other MMOs make something like, I don't know, 40% or something off microtransactions, and WoW's just not doing that. And they want to see more microtransactions. They want to see players spending that money. And like there's a strong argument that WoW Mobile has, like, these mobile games that are in development have to do with that, with them attempting to bring in these microtransactions in a way that people will actually spend money on them. But it is odd, because if you look at the players and you look at the player reaction, it does seem so vastly out of touch often. Like Fran Townsend, for example, her response and what she said was so it just felt like she had no clue what the feeling was. She had no idea how to read the room and what people were saying and how to react to that in a way. Like, I don't necessarily trust everyone. Like, for example, Mike Ibarra, the new co-president, he's being really good on Twitter, and he's like responding really well to fans, and he's doing this thing where he's like replying to people and stuff. I don't necessarily trust that, but it's clear that he can read the room, and he knows how to respond to the room and how to like deal with the on the ground atmosphere and how to, you know, sort of manage that. And then you get people who just, they don't seem to have a single clue what the fans are feeling, what the players are feeling, or care actually what people are feeling. And it's such a big disconnect, and I think it's a major factor in this. And like Fran Townsend again, you have to wonder, like, she sent out this statement and then she stepped down from her position, which originally, like her position as the involved with that women's thing. Originally, I thought she did that in response to the demand that she do step down, but apparently that decision was made before they even sent out that email. So she was already going to step down before they even made that demand, which just feels like it's almost either she is absolutely stupid, or, you know, it's almost calculated to have this person who gets attacked and then everyone hates her and then she does the big step down and then, you know, the fall guy sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It does feel like Blizzard has been very lucky that they have a couple martyrs. And one thing that I've been fighting pretty hard is that, like, we can't just be like, yeah, Afrasiabi was awful. Like, yeah, Fran is awful, but they're gone. Like that. Yeah. First of all, that's not what the lawsuit alleges. I mean, it alleges that Afrasiabi was horrible, but very much he is just the only name that was big enough to be named in the lawsuit. And I'm very nervous that we're going to lose focus and tunnel vision into a couple people that did awful things and make this about them instead of about the culture and about the world that multiple levels of management, it sounds like, allowed to fester and allowed to grow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's already happening. You can see people like zoning in on Afrasiabi. And like, I understand it because he's a great villain. He's like everything you want in a villain. But people are sort of treating it like it's an Afrasiabi problem and not like it's a culture problem, not like it's a Blizzard problem.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a difficult one because it's hard to blame people for that when he's the only visible person. Like when the lawsuit named two individuals, right? One of them's Afrasiabi, the other was J. Allen Brack. Now, the reason it named J. Allen Brack wasn't because, as far as we know, to our current knowledge, wasn't because he was some sort of an abuser. It was because he was a shit manager. Mm-hmm. He didn't do his job. He didn't protect the people he should have protected. He gave Afrasiabi a slap on the wrist instead of a kick up the arse. And because of that, you know, he's complicit. And that's why he was named. And he's gone. He's stepped down. So it's kind of like, who's left as a target? Well, Afrasiabi's already left, but we know that he did something actually physically badly wrong. So people focus on it for a reason because they need to go after someone. And at the minute, other than that, it's nameless, it's faceless, it's people at Blizzard. And when we look at the people we're seeing on Twitter at the moment for Blizzard, for example, you know, the majority of the employees that we're seeing are making the right noises and saying the right things. And it is incredibly fucking difficult to tell the difference between the sheep and the wolves at the moment. Mm-hmm. Really difficult.
And I mean, I think part of it, again, as somebody who hasn't been playing for a very long time, part of my vibe is that a lot of people want to be able to forgive their heroes. Like, one thing I will say, and this is, you know, as our dear lawyer here will tell me I should clarify, is alleged. I cannot imagine a world where Brack is responsible for anything, or like for not controlling Afrasiabi, and Brack knew about these issues and failed to act on them, and Morhaime didn't. That doesn't make sense to me, right? Based on the timing and based on when Afrasiabi was working there and based on when the major accusations come out, unless Morhaime had the most toxic culture in the world, where for whatever reason people didn't feel comfortable coming, and talking to their leaders until Brack stepped in, which is a major issue in and of itself, Morhaime knew. And he's on Twitter acting like he didn't. And that's, honestly, I would argue, I find it very hard to believe that anyone who is in management in Blizzard has clean hands. You don't have a culture that deep and that pervasive and that open. Like, we've seen the group chats with Fraziabi, like, they were very proud of what they were doing. They were proud of who they were. You don't have that without people knowing. And if you don't know, then that means that you made a really, really bad environment and people didn't feel comfortable coming to you. And that is an indictment of your leadership and your support of people in and of itself.
Yep. And even with like the people wanting to, how you phrased it, with their heroes, Metzen, I mean, he hasn't been out and out named that he did anything, but he knew. There's no way he didn't. You don't work that closely with a Fraziabi, and he can say all he wants that they weren't close and they just worked on the story together and that was it, but that's bullshit.
Yeah, they worked on the story together. Oh, we just went for smoke breaks. Are you fucking telling me that in a work environment, when you go for a smoke break with someone, you're not doing that because you know them on a personal level? You're telling me that you're not chatting to them on that smoke break? Are you telling me that a dick weasel like a Frasiabi wasn't bragging during those smoke breaks about the stupid shit he did?
Like there's no way Metzen didn't see the Cosby Suite photo.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way you were unaware of this.
And also, like, here's the thing. Metzen seems to want to imply that he didn't notice this stuff was going on or didn't know that this stuff was going on. His wife worked at Blizzard. His wife is on record as saying that she left Blizzard and had PTSD afterwards during all this stuff, right? Like, that's come out on Twitter during all of this post-lawsuit stuff, with the heavy implication being that the reason she had PTSD is because of shit that was going on at Blizzard. So you're telling me that his own wife had diagnosed PTSD about bullshit going on in the company under his watch, and he didn't know about it.
And again, you're trying to tell me that you work probably like 60 to 80 hour weeks in a company, and there is not a single woman who feels comfortable coming to you and saying, like, hey, like, if it truly is that Metzen, and again, I want to say we're naming names that are easy to name, but I really will push till the day I die that this cannot be a couple martyrs. Not martyrs is very much the wrong word, but like, this cannot be a couple
scapegoats.
Yeah.
Scapegoats. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Like, this is not just Metzen. This is not just Street. This is not just Morhaime. This is everyone, right?
This is very.
But if you truly were this good, safe, wonderful person, then why weren't there any women who were working close enough with you that they felt they could report to you? Like, because it seems to me like you maybe weren't as like safe and wonderful and perfect. Like, if you knew, that's a problem. If you didn't know, that's also a problem. Like, you cannot be a manager at Blizzard who can't point to like big, like big actions and big waves that you were trying to take and have your hands clean.
Yeah, I'm absolutely with you. I think you're completely right. Sarith has a co-pilot at the moment on the show, by the way. That's Sarith's daughter, you can hear.
Yep, sorry. She's usually not here when I record.
And to be fair, I'm kind of glad that he didn't mute himself for that. Because
yep, I thought I did.
Because honestly, people like Sarith's daughter, my daughter, those are the kind of people who we don't want to ever have to deal with this kind of rubbish.
This is the world we're working for.
Yeah, absolutely. The day after all of this stuff came out on, the lawsuit came out, I had an exchange on Twitter with somebody, and I said, this stuff can't be going on 20 or 30 years from now. Like, I was talking 10 years from now, 5 years from now, 1 year from now, 1 day from now is bad enough, right? But, like, if my little girl grows up to have to deal with any of this kind of shit, then every single one of us has failed her. Every single one of us. Forget her employers at the time or her co-workers at the time or whatever dickhead she's playing Call of Duty with at the time who calls her something. Forget that. it starts with us. It starts with, the cultures that are going to exist in 10, 15, 20 years' time because of the things we say and do now,
And
Sorry, go on, Lex.
sorry, yeah, for what it's worth, and I don't, again, I don't mean this to be dismissive in the slightest, but I do think back, I was a middle schooler when Gamergate came out. I could probably calculate back exactly how old I was, but it is striking to me that there's still a lot of really awful stuff and a lot of harassment and a lot of violence, and it's still very, very hard to be a woman in gaming. But and there was also a lot of harassment and vitriol that came out against survivors, but the degree of like cultural contempt and the voices, at least the voices that I heard the most in the Activision Blizzard King lawsuit versus Gamergate, it's a world of difference. Like, it's not good enough. We are not where we should be. We are not where we need to be, but we're moving, right? And that's worth something.
Yeah. As one thing that has struck me about this entire thing is when they talk about the Cosby Suites and they talk about these situations that these people have been in and how it's unacceptable. I recognize exactly what they're talking about. I can absolutely see someone like J. Allen Brack being in a situation with Alex Afrasiabia and thinking, no, this is fine, this is cool, this is funny, it's just guys being guys, because I've seen that culture myself. I've seen how it is. And it is heartening to see a certain amount of pushback to that I didn't used to see, like for example, that video where the girl gets up and asks the question about diversity in 2010 at BlizzCon. There's a video, the woman gets up and she asks, like female characters, maybe we could have some diversity from female characters. Maybe not every female character needs to look like she steps out of Victoria's Secret's catalog, I think she says. Mm-hmm. And Alex Afrasiabi responds with a smirk and a smile and laughs at her, and like other fans are booing her, and everyone up on that stage is like basically mocking her and saying, okay, yeah, well, we'll pick another catalog. And J. Allen Brack is up there. Mr. I always fight against bro culture is up there actively egging Afrasiabi on in that video. Mm-hmm. And I have seen a lot of the typical sort of bro culture response to that video. When we did an article about it on Wowhead, we actually didn't lock the comments on that by mistake. And the comments were so bad. Like, we had to lock them, but also that's kind of solidified the fact that we have to lock all comments on any of these videos, because there is definitely like I feel like there's more of the other side these days. There's more people who will look at that and go, no, that's terrible, that's awful, that should never exist. But the people who, the Gamergate people, that kind of culture, it's still very alive, and they're very loud, and they're like determined to try sort of almost reclaim gaming back for themselves. And they will come and they will hunt down these topics, and they will come and like comment on them and come and post their views, because it's almost like they're fighting a culture war, and the rest of us are just trying to sort of survive, in the world. We just want to enjoy games and like have them be halfway semi-decent and not think that women are being actively destroyed by the company that we enjoy because we like their game, Mm-hmm. But the people who are like these Gamergate people, they're it's like they're so hyper focused on it and determined to defend it and like excuse it and make it okay. And it's those voices that were being listened to back in the day when there was the Cosby Suites and there was all of this sort of thing. Like, it's not just the people at the company. It's the culture, it's the gaming culture in general that's sort of encouraging these people. It's why Fran Townsend thought she could get away. It's why the company in general thought they could get away with just sort of going, oh, well, this is ridiculous. Like, their original statement was basically SJWs are being weird, you know? And they really tried that. They really seemed to think that they could have gotten away with that. And that is because of the part of the community that's very vocally on that side. And the thing that's most infuriating is a lot of that community is now latching onto the lawsuit to sort of push their other agendas. With, like, you get people going, oh, well, look at what Blizzard has become, as if this is a new thing, when it's very clearly an old thing, and it's very clearly an old Blizzard culture thing. But they're going, look at what it's become, look at what Blizzard has turned into. This is clearly the fault of hiring new people and trying to diversify, and people trying to crowbar that onto the entire situation.
And I think actually, if anything, the opposite is true. Like, you know, and I'm not going to go too far with it, because it's very clear, again, from the thing, one of the brilliant things about the time we live in, right, is that we are seeing on social media employees at the company coming out and saying, no, that statement from the company is bullshit and here's why, right? And because we're seeing things like that, because we're seeing incredibly brave people, right? Because my understanding is that California is an at-will state, right? So these people can all just be fired at a moment's fucking notice. And yet they are coming out against their employer. And the fact that they are doing that means that we get almost like an in-progress thing from Blizzard, right? And it's brilliant, because I saw a tweet where somebody was basically saying, oh, well, it was all the old guard and that must mean that everything's fine now. And all these people who left over the last couple of years were probably leaving because they were culpable in some way, shape or form. And now actually what's left might be okay. And I'll be honest, if I'd just read that in a void, in a vacuum, I might have gone, maybe there's an argument there, don't know, right? Someone responded who works at Blizzard and said, bullshit, there are still people there now, you know? Yeah. And I'm like, great, this is what we need to know. We need to know that there are still problems there, and that there were problems there, and that some of those problems have left and gone and moved on. But they're still in the gaming industry, which means they're still a fucking problem. They're just not a problem at Blizzard, right? Look at
Greg Street.
Fucking Greg Street. He's a riot. You know the game Palia? I can't remember what the dev is off the top of my head. I know it abbreviates to S6. Syndicate 6, maybe?
Sounds right.
The person who was the community manager for Palia up until a week ago is an ex-Blizzard employee who is a fucking abuser. And her handle on Twitter is @Nellamore. And all of this stuff came out on Twitter because she was all, you know, hashtag a better ABK, woo, walk out, yay, I'm in support of all this stuff, and I'm a woman, so obviously I'm not a problem. And thankfully, a whole bunch of people who she abused came out on Twitter, which is great. So now we know that she's a fucking reject, and as a result of that, she has actually lost her position as the community manager at Palia, which is great. She is still employed by them, and they are being very careful about what they say, which makes me assume there might be something internal going on. But, you know, she has lost that community-facing position at that company, and that's good. And that's the kind of shit that we need to see. We need to see the people who are an actual fucking problem being identified to the fucking rooftops so that something gets done about them, you know? And that's not just within Blizzard, that's within the industry as a whole. But, yeah, you know, old Blizzard seems to have been what caused this problem, not new Blizzard. And to say that there is a divide between old and new Blizzard is still kind of bullshit, because it's still the same company, it's still the same, you know, the same atmosphere is probably there to one degree or another. And actually, I'm just really glad that, you know, these people have been working at home for however long because of the pandemic. How many people have probably had a much easier life because they haven't had to go into the office and potentially deal with abusers? You know?
That's like, even like with Blizzard people working in different companies. I know we mentioned Greg Street and him at Riot and the bullshit he put out statement there. I mean, Morheim is starting his own company now, and he was in charge of Blizzard for how long? There's no way he didn't know about the culture. Maybe he didn't actively do any abusing, but he enabled it.
He enabled it, and in fact, it sounds like from things again posted on Twitter, but it seems again that he was complicit in silencing voices, and
So you've got a quote here in the show notes.
it's not acceptable. Yeah, I have. So Cher Scala, who now works for Apple, which I have to say is a hell of a step up from Blizzard, probably in terms of salary and stuff. But she came out and said, as hard as this is, and knowing I'll never work in games again, Mike, and that's Morheim, was directly responsible for the chain reaction of events that got me nearly fired for CCing him about, and then there's someone's name that I'm not going to mention because I don't think I need to, but it says that person threatening her with violence for contacting emergency dispatch when she threatened suicide. So she's saying that Mike Morheim was directly responsible for starting a chain of events that got her fired for speaking up about someone threatening her with violence while working for Blizzard. That is somebody who is silencing voices.
Oh,
That is somebody who is not believing victims, survivors, and that is somebody who is absolutely 1,000 million %, and I don't care how bad that is in terms of maths, part of the problem.
Well, I think I've said this already, but it blows my mind how many people act like this. Like, I almost feel like there's some degree of misogyny in the gaming industry and in games and in the gaming community that we just forget because it's so normal to us. Like, it is constantly amazing me how people are still people are acting shocked, and I'm like, but for 25 years of my life, like, it's a running joke that games are misogynistic. Like, where did that energy go? Like, how are people living in the same world and like we all understand that games and the gaming industry is that's a misogynistic world until somebody says, I faced misogyny in the gaming industry, and then we're all like, no, you couldn't. Like, of course they did.
But this is part of the problem, is that people don't see the misogyny. And like, I have had people come and argue with me about how I've said, I think I wrote an article about the that question that was asked at BlizzCon. The woman who asked the question saying, can we have a bit more diversity, please? And freaking Alex Afrasiabi is the guy in that article, being a dick to her and saying, no, you can't have more diversity because women are this way and this is how we see. Like, it's him. We know who he is. He's almost like this. He's become this sort of bad guy figurehead. We all know and agree that we hate him now. And someone DM'd me to say to me they were really upset that I had said there's a problem with men writing there's a problem with men writing female characters where it's not necessarily that they're strong, but they're like stereotypes or something like that. And he was really upset with me because basically I had not said not all men. And he was like, he wanted to make sure that I understood not all men would write female characters that way. Only some men would do that. And like, the article was about a specific man. Like, clearly that's implied that it's not all men. Clearly it's about the one dude. I mean, and I got so many responses. To be really clear
about this, right? When people say men are a problem, right? Most of the time, in parentheses after that, you can imagine that they've said not all men. It doesn't necessarily mean every single man in the world. But if you're going to go into someone's DMs and say not all men, it does mean you.
Why did you get so offended by that one, honey?
Right.
What did that hit on ya?
Fuckwit.
Methinks he doth protest too much.
Exactly. Like, I had not aimed anything at this. I'd not aimed anything at this dude. I wasn't talking about him at all. But he felt so like upset that he had to come talk to me, and like, he's like, you have a very powerful platform, and
well, and like, what is he afraid you're gonna do? Like, men are the primary writers in gaming. Like, don't worry,
In
Bessie.
basically every video game ever.
She's going to radicalize them. She's going to radicalize them, and they're all going to go all social justice crazy. And
All
then
the characters
suddenly,
are going to be women, and they're going to
and
wear
then-
actual clothes.
and then we won't have any quests anymore where you get to beat a restrained harpy who's hardly wearing anything.
Heaven forbid.
Sylvanas will wear actual armor.
Oh, we've kind of got that now. I think she's wearing armor at the moment, right?
She still has a lot of exposed skin.
But honestly, right, like, here's one of the things that bugs me. There are people at Blizzard at the moment who I would cautiously say seem as though they're probably not part of the problem, right? Mm-hmm. And you see I'm having to use qualifying words here because you don't have a fucking clue. Like I said, the whole wolves and sheep thing, right? But, like, there are tweets out there from people who work in Steve Danuza's team who are saying Steve is a fabulous boss, he's handled all of this perfectly, and that the subtext is essentially leave Steve Danuza alone, he's not part of the problem, right? I'm not the only one who's seen those tweets. That's the vibe I get.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I look at the fact that he has this massive hand in the current story direction, right? And I look at the current story direction, and I look at what's going on in Shadowlands. And what's going on in Shadowlands, in large chunks, is women who have absolutely been wronged beyond a shadow of a doubt, being told vengeance is bad, don't go after your abuser. I know there's more to it than that. I know it's a deeper story. I understand that there is probably something bigger going on, and I'm capable of reading into different layers of subtext because I'm a big boy. But that is what's happening. Tyrande, Sylvanas. Last expansion, we had Jaina. You know.
Ashara.
There's not a single woman in World of Warcraft history that has expressed, at least that I can think of, and I'm sure someone's going to come in the comments with the one minor example that's a little fucking NPC, but I can't think of an example of a woman expressing genuine rage and not being written as, like, crazy or evil.
Yeah.
Without, like, women, and, like, but, like, women being enraged is bad in World of Warcraft writing, in my read of the lore.
Yeah. And as I said, that worries me because it tells me something, I think, about the people with current overall conduct of the story. Mm-hmm. Because it is, in my opinion, a misogynistic thing, a trope. Mm-hmm. And it kind of pisses me off a bit that it's still ongoing because it makes me wonder who there is involved in this story who still thinks that's a good story to tell.
Now,
I'm very interested to see Christy Golden's Sylvanas novel because I think if anybody can write a strong female character like Sylvanas, love her or hate her, it's Christy Golden. Or Madeline Rue.
And for what it's worth, 90% of the shit that people were giving Steve Danuza and his team about the current story direction, I think, is bullshit. I think the stuff about retcons, all that sort of stuff, is bullshit, and people have heard me say that before. You know, obviously this isn't today for this episode. This isn't a lore show, but my point is that I'm not laying into the writing of Shadowlands particularly. What I'm saying is that there is an underlying misogynistic direction there that I don't like, and it makes me worry about who's pushing that agenda.
Now, I love Christy Golden, but she is absolutely has done those storylines before. She's fridged characters before. I don't know if it was her decision to do that, but like the Thrall novel is one of his motivations is a girl who's basically a sex worker who gets killed, you know, and that like he liked her, so that's his motivation. I mean, it's pretty classic fridging. Christy Golden's novels have included problematic elements before. They're just part of the story. And again, I don't know if she's the one who put those in or if that's just like she had to work around them, because that's also a thing that people have to do. Same with Danuza. Like, you have this theme of people have to forgive and have to like not have revenge. That's a classic theme. That's a World of Warcraft theme from the beginning, since like Warcraft 3. That's like an axe that they've been grinding. I'd be really interested to see them step away from that, but it's always been there. It's always been part of the storytelling. What I can say is like I've personally interviewed Danuza, and I specifically asked him questions that I expected to get bad answers to, because I asked about Odin and Odin's treatment of Helya and how he is actually this awful person who has, he basically needs his own Me Too movement, basically. And Danusa, his response was not just to answer it, but he seemed really pleased that I asked the question. And he answered it enthusiastically. He was like, yes, absolutely. We definitely want to go there. That's definitely something. It's not necessarily coming out in Shadowlands, but that's definitely on the radar. Like he seems keen about like dealing with that issue. And I don't want to go out and say, oh, this person's good and that one's bad, because you don't know. But like my personal dealings with him have been fairly decent, especially compared to other people with the story. Like other people will dismiss you, and like if you ask anything to deal with like feminism at all, they're sort of like, why are you even asking this? What has this got to do with the game? And like instead of that, he seemed not only interested in, but he seemed enthused by that angle. Like it was really cool for him to explore that. And like I do like that. I like that that's where the story is going. I do think the story of Shadowlands is dealing with a lot of it's this legacy of like you can't just get rid of it. It's there. You have to deal with it. Like Sylvanas burned Teldrassil. Danusa didn't make Sylvanas burn Teldrassil, but she burned Teldrassil. You can't just go, oh well, she didn't. So how do you deal with that?
I suppose what you could do is allow Tyrande to actually explore her revenge to some degree, as opposed to just cutting her off at the knees.
Absolutely. Like there definitely needs to be, like I think they're doing a good job with Sylvanas and Anduin, but when it comes to Tyrande, some desperate writing needs to come in.
She's a casualty of the baby steps that you have to take to move away from that. I don't know, but it's good to hear what you say there about Danusa, because any of our listeners who listen to the Folk and Fairy Tales of Azeroth episodes will know. I was a really big fan of Visage Day and the way that was written, and I was also a really big fan of some of the stuff he said after that when people came at him on Twitter about that story. And I came away with very much the impression that Steve Danusa was a good dude. And then all of this came out, and obviously it just makes you second guess everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And actually, I think as a white dude in this space who does have a platform, I kind of feel like I can't afford to not second guess everything, because the last thing I want to do is be like, yep, this person gets the Dracoris seal of approval, and then 10 years from now have it turn out that they're a horrible serial abuser.
Yeah.
Well, and just, like to some degree, the people are complicated, and World of Warcraft is written primarily by a bunch of like older white people. I on the topic of Golden, certainly not always writing perfect feminist stories. I have not forgotten that the first time that I was really introduced to the name Christy Golden was when she tweeted out that she wouldn't make Anduin gay because that would be too cliche, right? Like there's a lot of layers of fuckery, and I think like you were saying, Laura, this is not a new the badness runs so deep that I think that there are nasty stories, like there's there's grossness deep in it enough that I think nobody has clean hands, and also everyone who's doing their best has to fight through a lot of gross. Yeah,
I think that's absolutely fair. And I think one of the things about Christy Golden as well is, as I think you alluded to, Laura, a lot of the story she was working through was essentially, especially in the earlier books, was here's the story that's laid out in these games. Here's the story that's going to happen. You write something around that. And so like the fridging of Taretha Foxton is something that I don't know whether that can be laid at Christie's door or not.
I mean, if you look at my favorite book from her is Before the Storm, and like everything I hate about that book was clearly not her idea. It was, this is what you have to do. And it's a great book. It's a beautiful book.
It is a really good book.
Took those story points and like did a good job with them. So
I will never, ever stop thinking about that scene with the Forsaken getting ready for the gathering. And
Oh my God.
the guys who, they're passing each other little bags of flowers to try and make their bodies smell better, and they're
they're putting
tying
little
bandanas
scarves.
over their missing
my
jaws,
God.
and trying
That
to
was
make
so
the
Stop it.
heartbreaking.
You're gonna
look
make me
slightly
cry
more
again.
palatable. You know, and yeah. So I mean, Christie's a fantastic writer. Some of the themes that she has approached in her writing probably aren't great. The Arthur's novel, you know, I bring this up a lot. Sarit will have heard me mention this before, but the bullshit in that novel where Arthur somehow isn't a bad guy immediately with massive red flags when he tells Jaina, "Don't deny me,
Don't
never
ever deny me."
Yeah, what?
never
What?
deny me."
What was that?
You know, fucking massive, horrendous red flags. Run, Jaina, run. You know, Strathholm should never
You
have
can
happened.
blink, you know that, right?
She's a mage. She could have just burnt him in the bed. You know,
Just open
She-
a portal and yeet.
she should have solved everybody's problems halfway through that book. And I think if Christy Golden was a feminist, she would have done. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I mean,
Let's
I
be
know,
a
I
little
know,
bit
I know
fair
she-
to
I know
Christy,
she-
though.
I know
She
she
did
couldn't do
write
that,
a
I know.
story about a character that had to get him from point A to point B, and point B was already clearly defined.
Yeah.
it's also not just like plot lines. Like, my fucking God, I have been rereading Chronicles, and I would argue pretty strongly that the race of trolls is racist, right? The way that trolls are made is racist. And like,
yeah.
what are you going to do? Are you going to cut them out of the game, right? Like, there's so many, again, this is a game that I love, and I have spent hundreds of dollars, probably not hundreds, but I've spent a lot of money on books, and I understand there's nuance, but there's also some degree of like, if you write a story for 10 years, you're going to have some bullshit to deal with.
Yeah.
Been more than 10 years now. I mean,
Oh, that's true, because that's just World of Warcraft is 10 years.
Right, and World of Warcraft's 16, 17?
Yeah, I got the Deathwing mount for was it 15th anniversary?
That was 15, and that was
Yeah.
2 years ago?
Oh, I'm a clown. Yeah, never mind.
Lord,
I just don't know what I'm talking about.
And Warcraft itself was out for a good 10 years probably before that. I mean, we're on like a 25-year story.
Mm-hmm.
With
I mean-
a rotating cast of writers as well. You know, it's not like
Yeah.
this is one
Yeah.
individual who's been juggling this story for 25 years. I don't know whether there is. I don't know enough about Blizzard's internal structure to know whether there is somebody who's been employed that entire 25-year period. If there is, I bet they can tell you some shit.
And then Fran Townsend will send a tweet about how whistleblowing is bad.
Of course.
Well, no, she won't, because she's not on Twitter anymore.
Oh, yeah, darn.
I kind of love
She'll
the
send
fact
an
that-
internal email on how whistleblowing is bad, and then somebody else will tweet it for us. It'll be great.
I love the fact, and this is, people say that the community doesn't have any power, right? People have made that point. I think that's bullshit, because Fran Townsend was a torture apologist for the Bush administration who somehow wasn't bullied off Twitter all that time. And yet, less than a week of the WoW community and her fellow female employees at Blizzard deciding that she was a shit turd, and she's gone. So there is definitely some power there. The thing is on people to use that power responsibly.
Well, and,
so,
you know-
I mean, one of the things that did happen in the wake of all this coming out is Chrissy Golden, who we just mentioned, went private on Twitter because of all the abuse she was getting. Jeff Hamilton, one of the devs, went private on Twitter and is still private on Twitter because of all the abuse he's been getting. You know, there are right ways and wrong ways to go about dealing with all this shit, and this is heavy emotional topics about something that a lot of people are very heavily invested in. It doesn't make it okay to harass people. You know, let's be really clear that, like, you know, I've joked a couple of times now about Fran Townsend getting harassed off Twitter. I've mostly done that because it seems that she is a pretty vile human being. That said, I'm not the ultimate arbiter of justice. Apparently that was once the jailer. But, you know, the ultimate arbiter of justice certainly is not me. And, you know, I may be wrong about all this. And actually, harassing Fran Townsend off Twitter was probably not something the community should have done. You know?
Well, and one thing I would add, and this is also not universal, but I've noticed that the people who seem to be jumping on this as an opportunity to be cruel and an opportunity to bully tend to be men. Similarly to how when there are issues involving people of color, I've noticed the people who are most likely to get like aggressive and take this as an opportunity to like vent rage are usually white people. And so on top of that, like considering when you're lashing out, when you're making blanket statements, when you're harassing and bullying people and building a superiority complex, are you really, like, ask yourself, are you really the one who's most hurt here? Are you really the victim who needs to be speaking the most? And are you genuinely speaking because you are hearing from victims that they need you and that what you are personally doing is beneficial? Or are you doing it because it makes you feel good and it makes you feel superior and you're kind of have lost the voices of victims within that?
There are kind of two follow-on points from that. One is that, circling back to Fran Townsend, the people who were giving her the most abuse on Twitter were actually her co-workers. You know, her co-workers who she had already blocked who she sporadically blocked on Twitter. Because these were the people who were in fact affected. You know, the quote-unquote bullying of Fran Townsend was done by people who were affected by the words that she put out there into the public domain. Now, the other carry-on point from what you've just said, though, is, there are people who are not listening to what the affected individuals actually want. And that's a big deal. When you look at what the demands actually were that came out of the walkout, one of those demands was not stop playing Blizzard games. It wasn't boycott Blizzard. It wasn't don't give Blizzard any more money. There is a place for that, I believe. You know, there is a place for an organised financial protest. I don't think there's anything wrong with the idea of that. What there isn't a place for is for some cishet white man to pop up on Twitter or Twitch or YouTube and decide to say, hey, what you are doing to respond to all of this is wrong. You know, you should not be playing this game. You should be boycotting. You should not be subscribed to this game. Like, if you're doing that, you are on the wrong side of this. Not if you're boycotting or not boycotting. Not if you're playing or not playing. If you are telling somebody else what to fucking do and how to feel, you are on the wrong side of this. Especially if you are a cishet white dude who does not work for Blizzard, has never worked for Blizzard, and is not fucking affected by any of this.
Yeah. If you're going to be the person who sits there and tells people that they're doing the wrong thing or argues with people when they try to converse, that's not your place. Like, the place you need to be in right now is a listening space and hearing what you can do to help make it a better space, and then doing what's being requested of you, basically, is the best thing I think a cishet white guy can be doing right now.
Something I've noticed a lot of is people responding in the way that they think is the best way, without actually people aren't checking in with the workers themselves. They aren't checking in with how the workers themselves are saying, this is how you can support us. This is what you can do. In fact, when we received a request for an article about the banner photos that workers had asked that we put up, it's just a picture. It's just like, you make it your banner photo. But like, we received a request saying, this is what we're asking people to do just to show their support. We published an article about that. So many people were like, oh, this is virtue signaling and it has no purpose and it's pointless. What are you doing? And one person was like, this is attention seeking. It's like, yes, it's attention seeking because they deserve attention. They should be seeking attention. There's nothing wrong with attention seeking, which is something you need. And like,
if attention isn't being paid, then change isn't going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And like, whether or not you personally agree that a banner picture is going to help the cause at all, whatsoever, if someone says to you, I am in this situation this is how you can help me. You fucking do what they tell you to do. You know, if they say this is a way you can show support, you go do what they say. If it's putting a little blue heart in your name, you go put that blue heart in your name. Even if it seems silly or stupid or like minor, if this is something that has been laid out by the workers themselves as a show of support they want to see, you go do that. And I'm really interested in how many content creators, usually men, who seem to feel that they're too good for these minor gestures, that they're like, they obviously sort of look down their nose at that kind of thing and obviously see it as like pandering or virtue signaling or whatever it is, but they don't do it. They don't do it because, you know, they're above that. They're too good for that. And it's just interesting. Like, but you've been asked to do this. This is what you can do directly. It's not going to change the world, but it's something that you've been asked to, just a minor thing. You could encourage your followers to do it. Your followers might do it. It might send a message. It might actually help. But no, that it sort of feels like people, it would be uncool for people, you know, to do it. So they yell and shout about the lawsuit, but they don't do anything that the actual workers have asked people to do. And it's very difficult to sort of, you know, the community itself is partly responsible for all of this. Because the community, the reason why all of this was something that people got away with was because the community was enabling it. And I feel like the community does not want to address that fact. They want to go, oh, it was all Alex Afrasiabi. It wasn't us. We didn't do anything. It wasn't us. He's an asshole. And also he's to blame for conduit energy. You know?
I know
who made Afrasiabi feel like a rock star? Because it probably wasn't the people at Blizzard. It was the people playing the games.
It probably wasn't the ladies in the Cosby Suite either, let's be honest. But honestly, I know I've spoken to you about this already in private, Laura, but guys, the day that I posted on Twitter something very similar to what Laura's just said about the fact that the community needs to take a look at themselves, two things happened. One, it was my most popular tweet ever so far, you know, which is great. It means that people were listening. I also had to block 72 fucking people that day. That's the reality of it. And I'm someone who has, at the time of that tweet, I had 320 followers on Twitter. So I'm not a big account. And I had to block 72 fucking people in one day because of one tweet. Because that's how little the community wants to look at themselves. You know, the responses I got were things along the lines of, and I can't quote them because I've blocked the motherfuckers and I'm not going to go and find their tweets, but it was things along the lines of, how dare you blame gamers for this? How dare you blame gamers for this? Gamers was the word that was used over and over and over and over and over again. And I can't help but think that these are people who are still butthurt about Gamergate. You know, that's my best guess. And it's just ridiculous. Like, if you are worried about defending the reputation of gamers at a time when people are telling you that a woman has literally fucking died, you know, that's the crux of this lawsuit. People have been abused, people have been mistreated, people have been discriminated against, and at least one person has fucking died. And
that we know of.
Yeah, and you're there trying to tell me that the reputation of gamers is important. Go and take a flying fuck at a running donut. I'm not in the fucking mood. Like, well, and also, just bullshit.
What do you mean by gamers, right? Like, did they think that you were attacking, like, you know, women? Probably not. Well, that's probably not a word in their definition of gamer.
Absolutely. Well, and also, do they think that I don't include myself in this? Do they think that I'm doing a World of Warcraft podcast without playing video games? For real? Like, not all men might need to move on to not all gamers or something. I don't know. But, like, it's just bullshit. And that's me. That's coming from, again, a cis-het white dude. Now, with a fairly small following. I guarantee you that if Laura had tweeted the same thing, it had been more than 72 people.
Oh yeah, I've conducted this experiment myself recently.
I'm aware, but you know, but we'll gloss over that. but the point is, people are fucking dickheads, and they are fucking dickheads to women and minorities more than they are to other men. And that's fucking bullshit in and of itself, but it's a fact, you know? I mean, when all of this happened, I think to one degree or another, all of you were aware of this, but my first instinct was to just never pick up another Blizzard game. That was my first instinct. My first instinct was, sorry, Sarith, you know, podcast over. That was my immediate instinct. I was like, I am never going to touch any of this shit again because I'm that fucking disgusted, right? And that's not performative bullshit. It's really not. Like, I have not been involved in the online gaming communities for very long at all. You look at my Twitter account, it started in 2016, but actually that was when I was playing Destiny on the PlayStation, you know, for the most part. And that account was dormant for 3 years before I started actually using it in 2019 when I started playing WoW and getting involved with the WoW community. I have only been paying attention to any of this shit for about 2 years, right? I am not deeply entrenched in any of it. And I would have quite cheerfully at that point just hung it up and said, fuck this, right? And then we had a chat with our patrons, one of whom is Laura. And, you know, we put it out there on Discord and we said, you know, what do you guys want us to do with the podcast? And that was as much because we had people paying for this podcast now. You know, there is a Patreon. And I was kind of like, I want to know what these people want to do. But in the meantime, there was a thread. And actually, again, you know, I'm name dropping you a lot here, Laura, but it was one of your threads on Twitter. And Stephanie Krutzik responded to it, who is a former producer at Blizzard. And there was a whole conversation where I basically said, what I really didn't like was not knowing who I was supporting at any given moment. Like, if I say the latest thing to happen in the Shadowlands story is brilliant, or it's shit, or something that happened back in Wrath was great or terrible, I don't know who made that. I don't know whether, in that moment, I'm praising the work of someone who's amazing, who's been repressed and who deserves to be uplifted, or whether I'm cementing the power of someone who's an absolute fucking monster, right? And I kind of hated that dichotomy.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was really on the fence about what I was going to do. We'd already kind of agreed we were going to try and do this episode, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do after that. And the response I got was, she said, "You're doing both at all times. You know, you are uplifting marginalised people, and you are helping the fucking monsters. You kind of need to get over that." She said, "That's the reality." So, but the people who are affected are asking you to keep supporting their work, keep supporting their friends, keep supporting their families, because that helps them keep making content and make change and change the culture and keep fighting, you know? And that was what she said. And I mean, it was a massive thread, and it's my pinned tweet at the moment if anyone wants to go and check it out, is that entire thread. And it's probably going to be my pinned tweet for a very long time, because it was really poignant, it was really well said, and it convinced me. And as far as I'm concerned now, and again, I'm not telling anybody else what to do. I think if you tell someone else what to do, you're a dickhead, right? Unless you're affected yourself. But I have been told what to do by someone who was affected. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, if you don't stay in the room, you don't get to have a voice in what's going on. And I think, you know, if everybody who's not a complete fucking misogynistic wanker leaves the space, that just leaves the misogynistic wankers a chance to make all the decisions going forwards. So that's my view, and that's why my intention is to be sticking around for a while, hopefully. So just in case any of the listeners are wondering about that, you know, that's kind of where I am. I'm still going to be playing. I'm not playing as much as I was, because I still have days where I look at the launcher and it kind of makes my stomach drop. Because some people say that you shouldn't be surprised by all this. I've seen that a lot. You shouldn't be surprised. Everyone should know that the state of the gaming industry is horrible and vile. But this was what I was getting at earlier when I said I hadn't been involved in this shit very long. Honestly, didn't really know. Hadn't been paying attention. That's bad in itself. I had the luxury and the privilege of not paying attention. You know, that's a fact. My exposure to the online gaming community didn't really start until about 2019. And it's been primarily Warcraft and primarily within the podcasting bubble. And so because of that, I have been absolutely sheltered from some of the shit that women and minorities have been dealing with for years and years and years and years and years. And so I was surprised by the lawsuit, by some of the shit that came out of it. And I shouldn't have been, really. And I kind of feel like now that I know what's going on, backing away from it isn't really an option, you know?
Yep. I mean, and I'm coming in almost the opposite boat from you. I've been in the online gaming community since like 2004, playing, first-person shooters. I played a lot of Halo, a lot of Call of Duty, a lot of sports games. So I could easily see that I was in the thick of that culture. I've been playing World of Warcraft for 14 years probably, and I've seen a lot of it, and I was somewhat surprised when everything came out, but I was surprised by some of the names I saw. I was surprised by how bad it was. What I wasn't surprised by was the community reaction. You knew there was going to be that outspoken douchebag reaction just coming from the absolute wrong place, because their space is being threatened. They want games for themselves. They don't want the gaming culture to change. And we can stay here and keep our voices out there and keep trying to make the gaming space more inclusive and better for everybody. Or we can say we've had enough and leave, and basically they win.
Yeah, and I think on top of that, one thing that I thought about a lot, especially as a fledgling streamer, was, again, the people that I saw saying on Twitter that they were getting harassed for still playing World of Warcraft were primarily female streamers. And this, maybe at the moment I was like, this might be a little bit selfish, but it seems like fucking bullshit that I would lose the career that I've been building, right? He who must not be named, he didn't get hurt by this, right? Most of the big male streamers, they got to keep going. And I was, being told that, like, I should throw away, like, the platform that I was just beginning to build. Like, that I should lose the career that I was building because a bunch of shitty men were shitty men. And I mean, to be honest and to be clear, the argument that ultimately convinced me was the same argument that convinced Chorus, right? I wasn't sure where I was going to go until I started hearing people in Blizzard and victims saying, please don't leave. And then I was like, okay, great. I will stay on. But that was one thing that I thought about a lot, is that the careers that were going to be hurt were not going to be men who play World of Warcraft. It was going to be women, and it was women who were being harassed.
There was an element of that for me as well, in terms of, like, I fucking love doing this podcast. I do. I have loved every second of it. I love talking to Sarith. I love talking about the lore. I love, the bonus episodes that we've only just started to do. We've done 2 of them so far. The next one planned is with you, Lex. and actually it was supposed to be roundabout now, and it was supposed to be about a much happier topic. But I love doing this. I love the guest spots I've got to do. I did a guest spot on But Wait, There's Lore a couple of weeks ago, and it was phenomenal. I loved every second of it. I like podcasting. I like the World of Warcraft. I like the story. I like the friends and community that I've made since I've been here. I would absolutely have thrown it all in the bin, if I thought that was the right thing to do. And that was a struggle. And this is not about my struggles. There's a reason we've got you guys on here, because at the end of the day, how it affects a cis white guy is not the end of the world. But for what it's worth, it did, and I would have absolutely hated to give up this podcast because of a bunch of dickheads. And I'm glad that at the moment that's not the way it's panned out. But there are people who have. There are people who have given up what they're doing. There are people who have stopped streaming WoW, who loved streaming WoW, and there are people who are just doing it a lot less and are branching out to other games, and that's cool too. Dimitanov has decided now that she's going to stream a lot more Final Fantasy 14, and she's going to do The Sims, and that's all great. But I mean, when you look at what I'm seeing anyway, is that you look at all these other devs and these other companies, and they're not exactly peachy keen either, And I think if you're going to step away from one company because of issues, you're going to have to step away from a lot of other companies too. And where do you stop?
I would take it a step farther and say, if you're not comfortable engaging with media and simultaneously critiquing it, you kind of can't engage with media, right? Like, yeah, I can talk for hours about problems that I see in World of Warcraft, and I still love it. I've still bought like every version of Chronicles I can get my hands on. I will still talk about it for hours. And there's not an unproblematic story. There's not an unproblematic creator. There's not an unproblematic anything. And that doesn't mean that we need to stop calling them out. That doesn't mean that when someone hurts people, we get to pretend that doesn't matter. And it also doesn't mean that when somebody is called out for causing harms, people who are not of the harmed community get the right to forgive them, right? We can't be like, oh, well, this person said something like racist, or this, like a man can't be like, this person said something sexist, but everyone's problematic. So like, we all just got to go through it, right? But living in a society means you're gonna encounter problematic media, and you have to be able to say it when you see it, and you have to be able to call it out, and you have to be able to love something and also see where it's not perfect, because nothing is going to be perfect.
Thank you for mentioning that bit about how it's not the place of somebody who wasn't affected to accept a fucking apology as well. Like, I say I haven't been much in the gaming community until recently, but I was pretty big in the wrestling community because I fucking love wrestling because I'm still a child. And the amount of white people who were forgiving Hulk Hogan for being a massive racist not that long ago, I just, it boggles belief. And that's kind of what you're seeing now. If you look at Mike Morhaim's tweet or Chris Metzon's tweet, the links are there in the show notes if you guys want to do that. Look at the comments. There are people accepting those apologies. There are people accepting those apologies who the apology is not fucking directed to. Like, it's you kind of don't know where to start with people like that. Maybe the block button. Maybe the block button is where you start with people like that.
That's the thing. It's like, people want it to be over. It's a very natural reaction. People don't like it, and they want it to stop. So they want it to be over. So people latch on to the apologies. Mikey Barr, I have no qualms with this man. He seems very nice. He's very good at Twitter, and people are like adoring him because of it. But like, a guy that's good on Twitter is not affixed to everything that's happening. Like, the main thing is those clauses that are still in people's contracts. What are those called?
Arbitration. Can I talk about that for a sec? Because as a lawyer,
yes.
I found that really, really interesting because we don't have those in this country.
Not in the UK, really?
No, you do have them in America. They would be absolutely fucking illegal here. It's ridiculous. Because you have, in this country anyway, you have the right to fucking sue somebody if they fucking abuse you. Of course you do.
Fucking mind-blowing.
The fact that, and I'm really sorry to turn this into a colonialism thing, right? but the fact that Americans talk about the land of the free and all that kind of shit, and then you are not free to fucking exact revenge on your abuser in the workplace. What the fuck,
revenge is wrong. Revenge is wrong. Are you not paying attention to the story?
But honestly, like, I didn't know what those clauses did until I heard about it on a podcast. I want to say it was either the episode of Frazaroth that you did, Lex, or the one after that Ali was on. It was one of those two episodes, and someone talked about it and said that basically it was the one after. It was Jared and Ali, and Jared said, because he said he'd been on the wrong end of one of these clauses before. And basically, what these clauses do is they make it so that you are not allowed to seek any kind of redress for a wrong done to you at work other than through the company. What the fuck, man? I mean, it may be that was being simplified slightly. I don't know, because I love Jared to bits. I know that he doesn't have a legal background, but equally he's been through this, so he probably does know what he's talking about. And if that's the way it works, I am absolutely fucking baffled, because that would be illegal here. Like, if something like that happened here, sure, you do. You go through HR first. That's what you do. And then if HR don't deal with it properly, you sue the fucking company.
I think there is, I again, also don't have a legal background. I would put a not insignificant amount of money on that not covering illegal acts by the company. But again, very much not a lawyer. So I might be about to lose that not insignificant amount of money.
I think that if it's an arbitration clause, if it's a clause in your contract, my understanding is that would be kind of cast iron. And if that contractual clause basically says you have to seek arbitration first, I think after that your option is paying a lawyer, isn't it? And I don't know how complicated that gets over there, especially
and the kind of lawyer you need for that is much more than the typical game dev can afford, and
especially because they get paid shit, which is another thing. And actually, I love the fact that the QA paid me hashtag that's been going around on Twitter has been enlightening, by the way, because QA really do need to get paid more.
I'm interested though. Like, I think most people agree that the arbitration clause shouldn't exist in contracts. Even the shitheads tend to sort of agree.
Except the CEOs, because obviously they benefit from it.
But at the moment, what Blizzard seems to be doing is like generating goodwill and like giving people what they want, and like they haven't addressed these issues. They haven't addressed these questions. And the only thing that's been addressed is Fran Townsend stepping down, which apparently was done before they even asked for that. And then technically they did address asking for a third-party arbitration, but then they used, that company. So not necessarily.
Just so for anyone who isn't following this properly, who hasn't read into this, what they did was they were asked to find a neutral third party to basically investigate all this stuff about what was it specifically they were supposed to be investigating? Harassment generally, right? And the pay gap and all that sort of stuff. And what they did was they instructed a firm called WilmerHale. Now, WilmerHale are a well-known firm who specialise in union busting. Union busting. And also,
correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't they announce that on the day of the Blizzard walkout?
I think so.
I believe so. And also, Ian Hazakostas, who we're all
used to work for the firm,
familiar with, used to work for WilmerHale. So, not a neutral third party by any stretch of the imagination.
Fran Townsend has
she has links with them. I don't think it's necessarily that she worked for them or anything. It's more that when she was with the Bush administration, the Bush administration worked with them. But yeah, so I mean, it's laughable to think that they are a neutral third party. That said, and again, protecting our legal liability, but WilmerHale are obviously a law firm. They're a big law firm. They do have a lot of employees. They do have a lot of professionals who are capable, and I am sure that it is entirely possible that whoever at WilmerHale handles this review will do a professional job, because obviously if they didn't, they wouldn't be doing their job as a lawyer for whatever state they practice in, the state of California. If you are licensed to practice law in the state of California, your first duty is to the state of California. So I would hope that if this thing does go ahead, whoever deals with it would do as good a job as anybody else, because it's their fucking job. I can understand why people are skeptical about that. I can absolutely understand why people are skeptical about that. I myself am skeptical about that. But I know how seriously, at least in this country, I know how seriously a qualified solicitor takes the vows that they make, and I would assume that it's the same for a qualified lawyer who's passed the bar over there in California, but I may just be being naive there. Yeah, legal liability covered. It's bullshit. It's bullshit.
Oh yeah,
we can't be sued now. You heard it from the lawyer. We can't be sued.
We have a lawyer. That is interesting though, because I have heard varying reports of the company, and it's good to hear.
I mean, they are not people who act for the little guy. Let's be really honest about that. WilmerHale are not a firm who act for the little guy.
The thing
they
is,
are.
America is not a country that acts for the little guy, is it? That's sort of
Nope.
the issue right there, isn't it?
X for the almighty dollar. The
Thou
little
shalt
guy on
not
the
have a
dollar, they like
union.
him.
He's a bro, a pal. Love him.
Especially Ben Franklin.
All about the Benjamins. But yeah, so in terms of things that we haven't covered, we've mentioned briefly that there was a walkout. That walkout, I think, was spectacular. I think it was a success in every way, other than the fact that Activision Blizzard have just ignored them and not done what they were told. But I think in every other way, it was a success. Like, it trended on social media massively. The photos were brilliant to see. That solidarity was great, and I think actually on that particular day it was something we all needed to see. But unfortunately, the demands that they made at the time of the walkout have, apart from the 1.5, and even one of them with an asterisk, apart from those, they have just been ignored. The arbitration clauses in the contracts are still there. What were the other demands? Do I have the list of demands?
I have to ask, what do we do? Like, as someone who's part of the community, I mean, my job is I work for Warhead, but I'm a freelancer for Warhead, so it's not like I'm a news journalist for Warhead. What I write, I pitch, and they accept it or they don't. So I have a lot of control. What do we do? I don't want to be the person who goes, oh, well, Mike Ybarra is evil, let's all attack him. And I'm enjoying this wave of nice stuff coming from World of Warcraft, going, oh, well, all the things that you were hoping for are happening now. But what do we do? What do we do as content creators? How do we respond? How do we use our position to make a change? Not to attack people because we don't like conduit energy, but to support the workers, to see a change happening.
That's the same exact question I think Dracoris and I both brought up to each other when everything came out. How do we keep going?
I think it sounds like Everly has some ideas.
Apparently more than a few.
Very good ideas, I assume.
Hey, we want to be listening to female voices. Everly, go for it. No, she seems to be pleading the fifth. Bloody Americans. So,
we fought for those rights. You lost the war, not us.
Lex, what do you think?
Oh man, I mean, one thing that so like I said early in this podcast, I have been deep in the social justice world for a very, very long time. And so one thing that I try to remind myself, if only to forgive myself for not changing the world yet, is that if we could just make it better, it would be better. So I think all we can do is listen and amplify and not forget, and not let people wiggle out of things, and not let time be an excuse, right? We can't let these men just, wait it out, make that impossible. Never stop bringing it up, right? Never let it just go under the rug. Like, obviously, unless and until there's genuine, real reason to believe there's actual growth. But I think that that's sort of inherent and understood. And I think just really centering survivors and centering the people who need it, and centering intersectionality, right? Recognizing that most of the voices we're hearing are still white people. And there's a lot of accusations of racism in Blizzard. And the lawsuit itself argued that there was an intersection of racism and misogyny that hasn't really deeply been explored. And just talking, not only talking when it's important, or like, sorry, not only talking when it's big news, but talking all the time, and talking when it's uncomfortable, and talking when people say, oh my God, shut up, we get it, games sometimes have misogyny, nobody cares anymore, we just want to play, right? Loving things and critiquing things, and not trying to find a piece of media that is uncritiquable, but instead critiquing everything we have our hands on.
Yes.
Which is a lot of fluff and wasn't a lot of action steps.
I think honestly, I don't think that is fluff. I can see why you would say it is. I can see why there would be some dickheads who would say it is as well. But honestly, I think it's accurate. I mean, the amplifying is a big deal. You know, the reason that we're all seeing all these stories on social media at the moment is because people are amplifying them. If this one dev who had 110 followers a month and a half ago just tweeted and no one retweeted it, we wouldn't know about it. That person now has 1,600 followers, and we all know what they were saying. You know, it's important. Clicking that retweet button sounds like it's not a big deal, but sometimes it really is. And I think that's something. It's not everything, but it is something. And another thing is, if you're in a room, and when I say a room, I don't necessarily mean a physical room. I mean a Discord call. I mean a raid group. You know, I mean a group chat. If you're in a room where somebody says something that is fucking unacceptable, say so. Do something about it. Stand up. It's really not that difficult. And I have been in those rooms before and not said the things that I should have said. And sometimes I look back at it, honestly, especially since this stuff has come out, it fucking eats me alive. It really does. There was a moment in a Discord server that I was in, well, that I'm still in, that happened nearly a year ago, give or take a year ago. And somebody, a woman, mentioned that something in a podcast had made her feel uncomfortable. And I remember vividly seeing that message on Discord. I remember seeing it at about 11 o'clock during the day when I had just listened to that podcast, or I was halfway through listening to that podcast, and I hadn't come across the bit yet that she was talking about. And I remember saying to myself, I'll finish listening to this and then I'll respond to that. And I finished listening to it while I was out for a walk. I went out to the shop to pick up some stuff for lunch. And on the way back, I heard the bit she was talking about, and it was out of order. And I agreed 100% with what she'd said. And I went back and I sat down and I started to type a response, and I didn't do it. I deleted the response. I didn't press enter. I didn't support that person. And 20 minutes later, after receiving no responses to it, that person deleted what they'd said. And I have felt like shit about that for a year. It's a small thing, but it's a real thing. And there are people who will listen to this podcast who will know what I'm talking about because it's been discussed in that Discord server since. And honestly, one of the big things I think I can do is to make sure that shit never happens again. That person should have been supported by somebody. And there were 100+ people in that Discord server and none of them said a fucking thing. And that's the kind of shit that shouldn't happen. Those kind of conversations in those kind of rooms, someone should be standing up to support the people who say something.
And I think adding on to that, not to show my hand as a socialist, but not forgetting your power. I remember a while back in this podcast, of course, I think you were saying something about here's one bit of evidence that the players do have power. The biggest bit of evidence is that there's hundreds of thousands of us and 5 of the fucking devs, or the senior members. There you go. The only reason that we feel like we can't stop things is because we are, first of all, made to believe that's true, and we're operating independently. And the more we combine forces and the more we work together and the more we push as a group, the more impossible it is to ignore us, because we inherently hold so much more power than the people who are supporting these misogynistic worlds, than the heads of these companies, than anyone. The masses have power. We've just been led to believe that we don't. And the more we believe that, and the more we lean into that, and the more we work in that, the easier it is to change things.
Lex for President 2024.
100% got my vote.
I think, don't you have to be 35 or something to be president?
That's true. I think I am too young. And also,
how else do the old people not keep power?
That's great because it means you have time.
there we go.
Yeah, I was only arguing with the
You can
2024
build
bit.
your
I'm on board
I
for
am
like
on
10
board,
years
yeah.
later. Yeah, I wasn't dissing it at all. I just 2024 ain't going to happen because I understand your laws better than you do. Apparently, American people.
There you go. Thank you for lawyering.
Yeah, hashtag lawyered. Yeah, there is still one lawyer in regular WoW Blizzard podcasting. There used to be
Just the
two.
one.
But yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this now for an hour and a half, and I've got to be honest and say that I think I could probably keep talking about it for another hour and a half because there's so much shit to say, and also so much shit to hear, you know. But is there something more that you guys want to tick off the box? Do I think you guys want to get off your chests that we haven't said yet?
So I have really sort of said this, but the one thing that I want to impress is the issues at Blizzard, the lawsuit. It's not a Blizzard problem. It's a community problem. And it's not a World of Warcraft problem. It is a gaming problem. And it's not a gaming problem. It is an industry problem. It's so much bigger than people want to accept. People want to sort of isolate it and make it about the one dude who's a bad guy, but that's just not how it is. And the sooner we realize that, the better. The sooner we start to work towards a better future and accept working towards a better future instead of sort of digging our heels in and saying, no, I don't want any change, like the better. And I love this game. I do. I love the story. I'm a lore fucking nerd. That's my career. I've built a career on it. I'm not out there to get anyone's blood. I'm not out there because I hate anyone or anything. But this is more than whether or not you like the story or whether or not you like the game or whether or not you like whatever is happening. This is a worker issue. And people have to start supporting the workers in this. A lot of people are making it about whether or not they like the game or whether or not they like this or that. We have to show support for workers in a essentially capitalistic dispute. That's what I want to see.
100%.
I think you're right. I also think there's something to add to that. You said, it's not a gaming problem; it's an industry problem. It's not just an industry problem; it's a societal problem. You know, it's not just women in gaming and minorities in gaming who are treated like shit. It's women and minorities, full stop, who are treated like shit. And I mean, I am not arrogant enough to think that LFR podcast is going to change a societal issue. But
hey, don't sell us that short.
But I also wouldn't want us to be silent about it either, you know? And I think the less people who are silent about something, the less acceptable something gets. If you're in a room with five guys, right? Say there are five guys in a room, and one of them makes a comment about a female coworker who's not in the room, right? If those four guys all laugh, you've got a major problem. Mm. If even one of those guys says, you can't say that, the next time, they won't make the comment. And it's tiny incremental changes like that I think are what are going to hopefully improve everything. And I kind of have to believe that because I don't think that the massive changes are going to happen. You know, this isn't like a fucking French Revolution thing where you can just round up the monarchy, chop their heads off, and everything changes. You know, that's not where we are. There are going to be days. I'm sure you two ladies would feel there are going to be days where actually it might be helpful to just line up all the cishet white dudes and chop our heads off, and actually maybe it would improve the world. Who knows? But realistically, it's not going to happen. What can happen is the kind of micro changes like that. You know, I know that there are things that would have been said in a workplace, and I'm talking about my personal workplace. There are things that were said 10 years ago in boardrooms that would not be said today. You know, things are getting better. It's a very slow process.
It's slow, incremental change, but the more we talk about it, the more we don't turn our back when things happen and have those uncomfortable conversations, the more that change speeds up and the more that change continues to happen. I'm in the position I'm in with work where I work almost exclusively with 16, 17, and 18-year-olds who it's their first job. We can let one thing happen there, or we can have it the other way, and they're going to go out into the greater workforce, and that's going to be their idea of what the workforce is. And we have, in the same way in gaming, we have new kids coming into the gaming community every single day. And we can let them look at how it was for how long and have them think that's the way it is. Or we can work on that small incremental change and make it a better place.
Yep, I think that's absolutely fair. We got anything else?
Oh, I should have run this by you guys, but if you don't mind, I have a bit of a shout out to make. So I don't know if this is only vaguely related, but if we're talking about oppression and harm in the gaming industry, I don't know if y'all have been following what's going on with Twitch, where a lot of streamers, especially streamers of color and queer streamers, are getting like hate rated constantly, and Twitch is really, as of now, does not seem to be doing much to protect them. So there is a call, if we're talking about things we can do, there was a call put out, I believe, by Wreck It Raven, REK It Raven, who is a streamer and also does some really incredible activism on Twitter. And they're asking us to have a Twitch blackout on September 1st. So nobody streams and nobody watches. And if the more folks are aware of that, we really, that is a very important picket line not to cross. And I would ask that folks remain off of Twitch for the entirety of September 1st.
I mean, for me, that's a really easy thing to do because I use Twitch maybe once a month. Because all of the people I follow on Twitch and want to watch on Twitch, like yourself, stream when I'm asleep, which is very inconsiderate.
Goddamn Americans.
But in principle, yeah.
God, Lex, can't you just be nocturnal?
I mean, like, listen.
To add to that as well, Lex, I think if I'm right, the hashtag that they're getting trending for that is it still the hashtag Twitch Do Better?
There's Twitch Do Better, and they're also now, because of this, is hashtag A Day Off Twitch.
Okay, hashtag A Day Off Twitch as well. So yeah, keep an eye out for those, please, guys, and do get involved as and how you can. Unless Sarit's really slow with the editing, this one will be out before the 1st of September.
It will.
So hopefully you won't be too late to be on board with all of that.
All right. Anything else anybody wants to bring up?
Well,
so I think, if not, I think we can...
one more thing.
Oh, sorry. Go
One
on.
more thing. I just want to say that as someone who grew up with World of Warcraft, someone who started playing from Burning Crusade, someone who's always been heavily into it, it's always been my thing. There's this idea that you want to work for World of Warcraft, you want to work for Blizzard. I think that recently has become this concept that's been questioned. I've never had that. I've always wanted to work for Wowhead. And one of the reasons why I've always wanted to work for Wowhead is because Wowhead is run by Peculiar, who is this female lead. She's kind of quiet. She doesn't really talk a lot about political things, but she's incredible. She's this amazing person who gives a platform to women and to people of Wowhead has this amazing staff. And I don't think people realize that. And yeah, one of the things that came up for me is I don't want to work for Blizzard. I don't want to work for World of Warcraft. But I love my job at Wowhead. I don't want to stop working for them just because of some assholes who probably didn't like the work that we were doing, And the power in sort of fan sites and what fans do with something like World of Warcraft, and I assume other things like Final Fantasy and that kind of thing. It's just incredible. It's worth looking at. And I'm done.
And yeah, Wellhead do some incredible work. It also sounds as though it seems like it's a fairly supportive work environment from things you've said before.
Very supportive. Very.
Which is a great thing. And if you are somebody who feels the need to comment on Wowhead articles in a manner that is negative or besmirching of Wowhead and or its staff, please do go and die in a fire or something, because honestly, it's just completely inappropriate. These are people who are working to provide content that is either news and illumination around the game, or actually fucking helping you play the game. Look at the guides and shit that are in there. If you're somebody who is going to go onto a website like that and give people shit, take a fucking look at yourself, man. Because the next time you get stuck on a quest and Google what to do, you're going to be left with fuck all if Wowhead's gone.
I wouldn't even know what legendary to use if it wasn't for Wowhead.
I don't know what legendary to use anyway.
Honestly, what would you do with our Wowhead, right? What would you do?
But yeah, honestly, guys, don't shit on Wowhead at all. But yeah, and I think the only other thing I really wanted to say, and Sarith, have you got anything?
I was just going to bring up the charities, but I have a feeling that's what you're about to do.
No, not yet. Yeah, feel free to hit that in a sec. But what I was going to say was just a really profound thank you to both Lex and Laura for coming on doing this with us. Scheduling has been a little bit rough with it being transatlantic and Sarith having a new baby very, very recently. On Lex's birthday, if I remember rightly.
No, the day before.
Was it the day before?
4 hours before.
Okay.
It was a tragedy, but still a Leo, so... Sorry.
But yeah, there's been a lot in between us saying we were going to do this show and getting to actually record it. And I just want to say thank you to both of you for A, agreeing in the first place, B, putting up with us over all the scheduling stuff, and C, being such illuminating and helpful guests to have on, because I don't think we could have done this show with just me and Sarith. I think it was really important to have your voices here. So thank you so much for that.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming on, for chatting with us, for talking to our listeners, and just helping us to use the platform we have to try to make it a better place for everybody.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Genuinely, I got into content creating because the only thing that makes me feel better in this hell of a world is talking about it. And so having a platform to speak is genuinely, deeply, really appreciated.
And we are going to be having both of you back at some point to talk about happier things, which is good. So our next bonus episode that we are doing is still going to be with Lex, I believe. And that should be a lot of fun. We are then at the point where all of our bonus episodes are going to be with patrons. And one of those is Laura. So we will be having her on at some point as well to talk about something happier, which is good.
As a patron.
But yeah, I think, Sarith, if you want to hit the old charity spiel.
Yes, so I don't have them all in front of me right now, but I will put a list of charities to support in the show notes. These are charities that different people from Blizzard and Blizzard devs have said are the right things to support right now. One of them is RAINN, RAINN, which we actually donated the proceeds from Patreon last month to, and Dracoris will say it was Dracoris. I've got the baby. I didn't really help, but he took that and not only matched it, but doubled it. So we did do that for RAINN, just what we could do. And yeah, I will put those links in the show notes. And just again, thank you, Laura. Thank you, Lex, for coming on. Thank you, everybody, for listening and sticking around. I know it's a hard time to listen to Blizzard podcasts for a lot of people, myself included, but it means the world to us.
One, I said we in the show notes for a reason. We're a team, dickhead. But two, it is difficult to listen to WoW stuff for some people at the moment. Some people want the escapism of it, and we will be back shortly with another more normal lore episode for you guys for that purpose. But there are other people out there doing similar things. There are a lot of episodes on this from other podcasts. Lex guested on one for Frazaroth that was excellent. And then there was one with Jared and Ali as well. And again on Frazaroth, and that was excellent. They're both really, really... If you're interested in hearing more about this stuff, they are must-listen episodes. There's also, on the other end of the spectrum, Live, Laugh, Lore, Jin and Ali's show. The most recent episode of that, Jin decided, essentially, that he didn't want to talk about WoW lore for an episode. So what he did instead was he did a deep dive into the history of the American women's rights movement, essentially. So he dedicated an entire episode of a WoW lore podcast to talking about the women's rights movement in America, and it was absolutely brilliant. And if you get a chance, go and listen to that as well, because honestly, in a world of absolute grey and shit sometimes, there are some really good people in the WoW podcasting community, and seeing how they have chosen to approach all of this is sometimes humbling. And so I would really recommend that everyone go and listen to that episode of Jin and Ali's if you can and if you have the time. Other than that, I think we can wrap things up.
Yep. So, Laura, where can people find you on the internet if they wanted to?
Twitter. You can come yell at me on Twitter.
I think you're muted.
Twitter. You can come yell at me on Twitter.
And it didn't pick up your Twitter handle.
It's at Discordian Kitty.
Thank you. And Lex, where can people find you?
You can find me also on Twitter and primarily on TikTok and also on Twitch. All of that is going to be Lex, Lex _RANTS.
Lex
Thank
rants? Yes,
Lex.
she does.
I fucking do.
And obviously, if you guys want to know where you can find us, none of that has changed. I'm still at Sarith. Dracourse is still at Smiting Titan. The Destiny reference right there. I see it. The show is still at LFR Wowcast. You can still email us at lfrwowpod@gmail.com. And if you want to become one of our amazing patrons, like Laura, you can find us at patreon.com/LFRWowcast.
And I would just like to point out that the Patreon money next month is going to Sarith whether he likes it or not, because he's just had a baby. So if any of you do want to hop on the Patreon train, now's the time to do it. Buy Sarith something for his baby. Come on.
No
just
pressure.
sub for a month and then go off again. Come on. Buy Sarith's baby a birthday present, you bastards.
Jesus. All right. Well, with that, I think we're going to call it. Thank you again, Lex and Laura, for coming on. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And we'll be back in your ears soon with a more traditional episode. Bye, everybody.
Thank you guys.
Night.
Bye.